Welcome everyone to An Author a Day Live, an effort to support writers in need through book sales, author portrait print sales, and donations to the Authors League Fund. Each morning, a new author portrait will be published at beowulfsheehan.com/anauthораday and at instagram.com/beowulfsheehan with links to purchase that author's works. 100% of proceeds will support the Authors League Fund. Since 1917, the fund has helped professional writers in dire financial need. In the month of April alone, post-COVID-19, the fund has helped 300 writers in dire need. There will come a time when we will need to reflect upon, heal, and progress from this challenge of our time. Writers will meet that need then. Thanks for coming to their aid now. Our guest today at An Author Today Live is Jason Reynolds, author of 2 poetry collections and author or co-author of 14 books, most recently among them Look Both Ways, A Tale Told in 10 Blocks, and Stamped, Racism, Anti-Racism, and You. Jason is the U.S. Ambassador to Young People's Literature and makes his home in Washington, D.C. Ladies and gentlemen, please make room in your hearts and on your bookshelves for Jason Reynolds.
Word up. What's up, brother? Good to see you, man.
So good to see you. How are you today, Mr. Ambassador?
You know, today is Saturday, and that doesn't really matter anymore, right? It's like this weird, it's like this strange, I'm living in a strange liminal space where it's like, today is whatever day it is, and another day for me to figure out a way to drum up some sort of energy to do something with my life, even if that's giving myself a break, which has been, it's a complicated time. But I'm good, man. I'm healthy. I'm all right. No complaints.
That's all that really matters at this point.
For sure. How are you? You're good? You're healthy? Your family's good?
Very, very fortunate. Very fortunate. Yes, 3 people in my life succumbed to the virus last week. But I'm very fortunate that nobody was in my immediate family and that I still have a big world of healthy people out there.
For sure, man.
Therefore, and of course, that's exactly what you're doing.
For sure.
Big scale. And that love that you give to the world, of course, begins with your books. That's fair to say.
Yes.
And I would love to chat then about this work that came out just in March called Stamped. Share with me, if you would, a few words.
I mean, Stamped is sort of the book. It's interesting. I always tell people, if I never write another thing, right, if this is the end of my career, hopefully not, but if this was the end, if the 15, 16 books that I've written, that's it for me, which is all right. I'd say I did okay, but Stamped is the one that I think will be what is most quote unquote important. I'm careful about the word important, right? But I do think Stamped is sort of my contribution to the greater conversation that pushes the greater conversation around race in America, specifically as it pertains to young people grappling with these ideas, to then push that conversation forward as they get older. If I can do that, then I'm all right. I'm good with it, you know? And so for those who don't know what Stamped is basically it's a retelling, it's a reworking of Dr. Ibram Kendi's Stamped from the Beginning, which was this academic tome that came out in 2016. It's about 600 pages that's giving this sort of the definitive history of racist ideas in America. And he called me and was like, yo, I want you to rewrite the book. Rewrite it for kids, rewrite it for people who may not have the quote unquote intellectual capacity to read a 600-page book, or the time and energy to read a 600-page book. Figure out a way to make this thing a bit more palatable and accessible for the rest of us who don't spend our lives studying race in institutions of higher education, right? And I said, absolutely not. Right. So he asked me to do it, and I was like, nah, I'm good, champ. Like, I don't think that's for me, not because I don't care about the topic. My whole life is a political life. My whole life is one that is all about these ideas. But to take another person's research, life's work, and to tear it apart and to turn it into something that is interesting and fun and funny and poignant for a 12-year-old and a 75-year-old to both read and understand is a very complicated thing. And so my talents were challenged and my intellectual capacity was challenged, and I was humbled by the work. But ultimately, after saying no 3 times, I said yes. And after working on it, over and over, draft after draft, I eventually sort of settled into what I wanted to do.
We're glad that you did. There are conversations we have in our homes with our children, with our families, that are very micro-level conversations that impact our entire worldviews. Of course, our world begins with our families.
For sure.
That is the book of those that you've composed thus far that speaks to a societal concern, but it absolutely works on that intimate parent-child level.
Yeah, that's what I want.
Every single relationship we have is somehow, at least in this society, touched by that. It is, as I wrote earlier today, I think it's the great shame of our country. And to be able to speak about it openly to people of now all ages is such a healthy thing. It's a conversation we are more than late to have. And there are many people who don't wish us to have that conversation. So every time that book gets out there, we become that stronger people to be able to confront that sort of thing. And I thank you so much for this book.
Man, I appreciate it, brother. I mean, ultimately, look, I've traveled the world, and writing has afforded me the opportunity to see the world. And I will never forget the first time I was in Germany. I was taken aback by how they grapple with their history, their sordid past. They confront it head on. The children in Germany start learning about sort of the war and Hitler in kindergarten. They have picture books about Hitler that German children have to read and study and learn from every single grade of school, so that by the time they're 18, it's not hard to talk about. It's not a thing, and it's so ingrained in them that they're like, I know what it is, and I don't want to go back there, and we're going to work hard to not go back there. Whereas America is still eggshelling a conversation. It's so weird to fill a room with eggshells when there's nothing in the room but elephants, right? It's like it's impossible for an elephant to not step on the eggshells. We might as well address the elephant, right? Like that makes more sense. Right. And I think that's what Stamped is aiming to do.
Right. Well, my hope for the book, of course, is that it becomes a staple to the point that now every child moving forward across this country can have that early life education about this part of who we are.
Yeah. And
then move forward so that we are on par with the way that Germany is responding to acknowledging its history so that it's never repeated. Because that danger, of course, lives with us without something like your work and without Dr. Ibram's work. And it's very, very vital stuff. Thank you. Thank you so much for it.
For sure.
Reading it, I was reminded of the great words, I can't believe I'm about to say this, of Flavor Flav.
Hey, man.
It would have been the early 1990s that Fight the Power came out, and there's a verse in there in which Flavor Flav says, it's not history, it's his story.
Mm-hmm.
When I look back on my own education about this topic, I absolutely recognize a number of names. And I was a child when I saw Rocky, but I never processed it as it's now explained to me, and it makes perfect sense.
Oh, my goodness.
So many things that happened in this country's history were never shared with me.
Yeah, I mean, think about it, right? Public Enemy, they also said, F. Elvis and John Wayne, right? Because of what they understood John Wayne to represent, right? John Wayne representing the sort of American cowboy, and it's like you can't have a cowboy story without talking about genocide,
right?
Right, like it is impossible for us to discuss the cowboy, especially the cowboys that John Wayne was playing, without talking about the occupation of the frontier. Like that's a reality, and I think this book is meant to normalize the conversations around race and to normalize the truth about this country, and to explain why we are where we are and why we are who we are, right? Why we do the things we do, why our media is the way it is, why our schools are the way they are, why our policies, which are really where the racism truly lies these days, right? And by the way, they've always lied in the policies, right? This isn't a new thing, right? The argument is that racist people create racist policy, when the truth is that racist policy is what perpetuates racist people, right? And so it's easy to say, a prime example would be something like when you look at the very beginning of this country, when you think about the Puritans coming to Massachusetts. The Puritans came to Massachusetts and they running away from being persecuted, religious persecution. They come to Massachusetts to start the Puritan church. But they also were believers in Aristotle. They were Aristotelian thinkers, right? Aristotle believed in human hierarchy. He believed that Greeks were superior. He believed that anyone who was not Greek was inferior, not because of, for no other reason except for the fact that wherever they were from had extreme weather, right? So because Greece had cool weather, That's it, right? Because Greece had temperate weather, moderate weather. He believed the Greeks were superior and that Africans, because of the heat, were inferior. And anyone who was sort of Mongol because of the cold weather was inferior. Or if you were like all these other, right, all this silliness, right? The Puritans come and they say, look, if Aristotle says that there could be human hierarchy with the Greeks, then there can be human hierarchy with the Puritans. And so they build it into the Puritan church. The same group of people who build the Puritan church also build Harvard University, America's first university, and they say that the one thing that can never be challenged in this institution is Greek literature, which means Aristotle's thought process can't be challenged. So the human hierarchy is woven into the church and the school from the onset of the American experiment. Right? Like if we think about it this way, we really frame it. It's like, man, now I have to go through and look at these institutions. It doesn't mean I have to rebel against the institution, but I have to critique the institutions and to figure out which part of these institutions are racist because at their core, they were built to be so in this particular country.
Right. And the word in there, in your description, of course, is human. And these are humans with biases.
That's it.
Biases to their writings and then to their teachings. And those biases keep going through. When we're able to have an open dialogue to remove those biases, we'll discover what we already know absent those institutions, which is just how wonderful we are as people, no matter what we look like.
Yeah, and if we have information, we can have less emotional conversations, right? We need information. We need to be informed. It's easy to be angry, but it's easier to have discourse when there's information, right? Emotion is going to breed the anger. It always has, it always will, and it's warranted anger, right? Yeah. But with information, we can turn the corner and just be a little more constructive about what it is we're trying to do.
Thanks to whoever coined the phrase "cool heads prevail."
There you go.
Yeah.
I don't always live up to that, me personally, but I'm working on it. Yeah.
Life is interesting. Let's talk about then the other end of your life, which is that greater part that drives you, if it's fair for me to say, which is loving children. And through your work, doing such beautiful, beautiful things for children. And so, of course, your most recent work is Look Both Ways. And let's do that. Let's look both ways on behalf of them. And tell me about that book.
So that book is, so first I have to say this. I don't trust nobody who don't love kids. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't mean that you're a person who is good with kids, right? Everybody's got is different, you know what I mean? Not everybody has that muscle. But if you don't think it's valuable to pour into the lives of our children, you can't be around me. Like I don't, my mama say, I don't trust nobody who doesn't put children and elders, right, at the forefront of our lives. If you ain't loving up on our babies and our elders, and I'm not exactly sure what it is that we're doing here. And so even with my partners and my colleagues who work in this business and in this industry, even my buddies who work in the adult sector, I'm always challenging them the same way. Like, look, I am impressed by all the beautiful things that you've made, but if you ain't doing nothing to love on these kids, you're not nearly as impressive as you think you are, right? And that's just the harsh reality from where I stand. So Look Both Ways is just another one of these books that I've written as a love letter to children. All of my books are love letters to the children of the world, to let them know that somebody sees them and somebody loves them and somebody knows that most of the things that they're being criticized for have less to do with who they are and more to do with how old they are. At the end of the day, a 14-year-old is going to be a 14-year-old, and we can judge him as if he's 30. But the truth is, most of the time, the things that drive us nuts have nothing to do with him and more to do with the fact that he's 14 or she's 13, right? Give her and him a chance to grow up, and then we can figure out what's going on. So Look Both Ways. It's about, very simply, it's about the 10-minute walk between school and home. That's it. Right. I wanted to write, when we think about kids' lives, we think about school, we think about home, but there's this gap period, right? If you're a kid who walked home, right? If you live in a city or if you live in a suburb where you can get from your home to the school and back and you don't have to ride the bus, that's a very different experience. And it's 10 minutes of unmonitored time. There's no adult there. It's just you on your own with your friends going on a 10-minute adventure from the school to the house. Everything I got into, good, bad, ugly, and interesting, happened on a 10-minute walk home, right? Everything I learned about the world, a lot of it happened on a 10-minute walk home, right? Like, and we don't ever talk about it. But it's a 10-minute isolated bubble that's full of all kinds of interesting things. And so I wanted to honor the kids by writing 10 stories about the 10-minute walk from school to the house, to show how many different journeys exist in that 10 minutes. How many different kids sit in the classroom every day who know each other every day but go separate ways when the school bell rings, and to honor and show in its fullness the autonomy of children. Right? Children are autonomous figures. They are autonomous beings, just like the rest of us. They have minds of their own. And when given the opportunity to be independent, it's a fascinating thing what they do. It's fascinating to see what children do once given the opportunity to have a little independence. And so I wanted to sort of put that on the page. And it's got a little bit of everything. Some happy, some sad, some tension, some violence, some jokes, some romantic stuff. So I think a little bit of everything is in that, in that little book.
I think there's enough of everything in there such that there's some story that's going to speak to any child or young person or adult.
Yeah. I mean,
won't be true for me.
Look, man, I learned, some of those stories are personal stories about my own life, Like there's a story in the book about, the kids who have to walk the other way home, right? So you have all these kids who are walking to the left, and then there are these two kids who walk to the right. And to the right is where the projects are, and how their experience is completely different and yet completely the same, right? Like, and that when they walk down their boulevard, a boulevard that everybody's afraid of, to them it's paradise. To them it's ain't nothing to be scared of. It's my home, right? And to show that and to push back on the stereotype and to say, nah, we like it here. We like the corner store. We like the noise and the ruckus of the metro bus and the beauty salon with the burning hair and all these things that become very familiar for those of us who live in those environments. Ain't nothing to be afraid of, right? We like it here. And then you see other neighborhoods where it's like the big houses, right? And how there's this idea of safety around the big houses, but the girl who walks through that neighborhood doesn't necessarily feel safe. If anything, she's wondering why every house looks the same, why everything seems the same, right? And how much anxiety comes from anything not being the same, because her whole life has been a sort of like, this is what life looks like. Every house is the same. Every car is the same. The grass is cut the same length, right? And so we praise that normally, but I'm saying, let's push back a little bit to say, isn't that like, where's the creativity and independence in our abodes if your neighborhood is literally a model home replicated 500 times, and you got to keep your grass at 1 inch, and you can't do, like, nothing is wrong with that, but we praise it as if there's nothing to critique there. You got kids who live in apartment buildings that are not projects. It's funny that in children's books, we always equate apartment buildings with the projects. It's like people live in apartments. Like, I lived in apartments. Like not every building with separate homes in it is a project, right? Like there are such things as apartment buildings. And so even showing like all the different terrains and landscapes, old houses, new houses, apartments, projects, a little bit of everything.
That's part of the magic of books, because I know my world, but I don't know everyone else's world. And you're showing me, you're going to show all these children, these are other worlds. So, hey, this is life for them too. Nothing about which to be scared. The biggest fear that we see policies putting out there is taking advantage of fear of the unknown. I haven't had a chance to get to know my neighbor, and we're taught to fear our neighbors, taught to be concerned. Don't walk that way. You're going to walk to the left, not to the right. Well, what's wrong with walking to the left?
Exactly.
Here's what it's like for them. Maybe it won't be so bad for you too.
Exactly. And what's it like to make mistakes? Right? What's it like to explore? I mean, there's a story where the kids are, they're trying to the boy wants to go and talk to a girl. And his friends are trying to like, get them together, right? So they're like, all right, well, look, if you're going to go talk to this lady, if you're going to go talk to this girl, you can't be ashy. We got to get the lotion. So you see these kids lotioning up their homeboy, right? And then they're like, you guys smell good, right? So you see them spraying body spray, right? Because that's the stinkiest stuff in the world. But when you're 10 years old, that's your version of cologne, right? So they're spraying them down with body spray. And then you see one of them say, you can't have ashy lips, especially as like black people. See, this is a big deal in the black community, right? These things, like you don't want to be the ashy kid. It was a big deal when I was growing up, right? And so you see the kids like, you can't have ashy lips. So they put vapor rub on this kid's lips, and his lips are burning, because they don't know that vapor rub ain't the same as just as Vaseline. Right? And so we can all these things feel really silly, but the truth is, this is young life. Like, this was my young life. This is the way it went. It was like, bro, let's just try whatever we think is the right thing and make all the mistakes and then figure out what the right things are. But the mistakes had to be there. And I want to show these kids fumbling through their lives with all the confidence in the world, right? But fumbling through their lives regardless.
What's wonderful about how that story finishes is that it doesn't really finish.
It doesn't finish.
It's a lovely thread in your work because you're inviting the imagination of the reader, that young person, to take it to another place. What a great, great thing.
I want to challenge Beowulf. I want to challenge that, in that story, that young man does all the right things. And he wants to get this girl's phone number for all the right reasons, right? He's like, yo, she's nice to me. She's super smart. Like, I'm rocking with her because she just seemed like she don't tease me about my ashy elbows and stuff. Like, she just seemed like she's a nice person. But when he asks her for a phone number, you don't know if she's going to say yes or no, because the truth is, just because you did all the right things don't mean she owe you anything.
Right.
It doesn't always work out for you regardless, and you got to be okay with that. And so I wanted to make sure that we left it a little open so that young people can have discourse about what exactly happens. If she decides that she don't want you, she has the right to not want you, even though you did all the right things to be a gentleman and to be respectful. So what? Good for you, but it doesn't mean that she owes you anything still. And I think all those things are important.
Have you had that conversation with young people, asking them how the story goes?
With that book, I've had that conversation with a few young people, yeah, and they're like, we don't know, because she kind of smirks like she's going to laugh at him, so we don't really know, Same thing with the kids, the Call of Duty story with the two boys who kiss. Man, kids are like, well, is so and so gay? I don't know. Does it matter, right? And it's like, well, who's the real bully? Who's the real victim here? It's like, well, to some extent, obviously, the kid who gets beat up is the victim. But shouldn't we be asking questions about the young man who kissed the boy in the first place and why he feels so angry about not being able to express himself? Like, truly, that's where, right? Maybe we should be having a conversation about young people who can't be themselves because of the pressures of the world around them. And it causes violence and it causes harm, right? All this extra stuff. Or maybe we should be having conversations about, what it means to be an ally and a friend. Right? Like, I was a kid who my friends, multiple plural, started to come out to me in the 9th grade. And I had to figure out, what does that mean in my life? Like, what was my role in their lives as we enter into a very new space where they're going to be treated very differently. And they're expecting me to love them. I can't claim to love them if I'm silent when the pressure comes, right? But I'm 13 years old, right? So these are, I think, look, these are things that we got to run toward. There are ways as writers that we can do it in a way that doesn't feel didactic, when it doesn't feel preachy or teachy, but instead it's like, let's present the opportunities for there to be discourse amongst our kids. That's it. I don't want to give away no answers. I just want to present the opportunity for there to be some conversation.
What a wonderful thing. That has me thinking of the early comment you made when you go to, at the publisher's offices, people who write for adults and editors working with adults and imploring them to love kids if they're not, or wanting to make sure that's part of what they do. But that's the great thing about books, of course, is that you're writing them for people who will be of a certain age, and then they'll be adults themselves.
Yeah, I think
having that dialogue.
Man, look, and that's why I don't understand why, people always say, yo, Beowulf, and this is the reason why I was so grateful to be involved in your book, by the way. And I know you're not plugging your own book, but, the author book was such a big deal because to be included in that book with Toni Morrison and all of my favorite people, my photograph is in that book. It meant something to me because in this industry and in this business, there's this weird hierarchy that kind of plays out sometimes. And there are a few of us that break through and get to kind of move in all the spaces. And I feel fortunate to be one of those people. But I always make sure that my buddies on the other side of that wall, whether it's nonfiction or whether it's adult fiction, whether it's poetry, that they understand that your work is no more real than my work, right? They're like, oh, when are you going to write a real book, Jay? I've written 15 real books. Right. And they're like, well, why do you choose to write for kids? And my response is always the same. Who else is there to write for? Like, honestly, who else is there to truly write for? I can write for adults. Oh, look, there's more than enough adults. We got enough. We know what's going to happen. There's going to be a relationship and a little bit of adultery. Somebody going to get hurt. I mean, look, when you get older, our lives get so boring and mundane. We know what this is about. Like, it's like, all right, but kids are full of adventure and discovery. Why not pour into their lives so that they can grow up and break some of these systems and shake the table a little bit? Why not? Why not make whole people? Right? Or continue to fill them out as whole people. They're already whole, but how do we continue to add to that wholeness? You know, so that they don't grow up and say silly stuff like when you're going to write a real book.
Great. So then let's talk about now. We're in different times such that this is how we say hello to each other in 2 dimensions instead of 3. A book is a 3-dimensional thing that we can mail to somebody, but to have this kind of discourse is a really, it's a vital thing for us as human beings.
Right.
You are still doing that. You are still reaching out to children and families across the world through your different programs in this time of COVID-19. You're reading your books online. You've got this program, Grab the Mic, Imagination Stretch Frame, Brain Yoga. Let's talk a little bit about those things you're doing to help enlighten children now.
Yeah, you know, look, I was named the National Ambassador in January. And the plan was to basically go dark until the fall, because the thing about the ambassadorship is you get 2 years, and the first 6 months you really need to kind of build out your platform, you got to prepare everything, right? They tell you about the ambassadorship in November, right? You get announced in January. And so you need time to actually build this thing that you're going to sort of use. So the plan originally was, all right, in the fall, we'll be all ready to go. We'll have all the things in place. We'll hit the road. We'll really kind of push out this thing that I've worked really hard to build. And then COVID happened. And suddenly everybody is like, yo, so you gotta say something. Right now, it's almost like a president in a time of war, right? It's like, all right, well, this is sort of what I've been asked to do. And so now either I'm going to stand on my square or I'm going to be made a hypocrite. Now I'm going to either pull from a vast quiver or be proven to be a one trick. And for me, it was like, look, this is an opportunity for me to make sure that I really stand up and do the things I need to do. I didn't take when I first took the ambassadorship, I told the Library of Congress, I told Dr. Hayden, look, I'm not going to do it unless you let me do something that actually matters. I don't want any vanity awards. I don't need any vanity positions. I don't need any of that anymore. Like, I'm good on all of that. You can keep your medal. You know, I don't need none of that. Right. So this is a college that we really had in real life. I don't need none of it. I don't need it. So if I'm going to do it, y'all got to give me the rope to do anything I need to do to serve the children. If it's not going to be that, then I'm not your guy, right? And so now I was in a situation where it was like, all right, well, now I'm going to have to show up because that's what I asked for. So now I'm going to have to show up. And so it started with Right. And Right was something that I came up with because I realized that all these kids were now being they were distance learning, right? Everybody's at home working with teachers. Teachers and parents have a tremendous load right now that they're trying to bear. And I want to be respectful of the teachers because I feel like, look, teachers are doing the best. Look, are there some bad teachers? Yes. But are there a lot of good teachers who are being forced into complicated teaching because of bad politics? Yes. Right? That's a huge thing, right? And so I have an opportunity to say, all right, teachers, you're doing the best you can with what you have to work with. I am going to offer a little help, right? If you're teaching English, look, if I can take a little bit off your plate every week, twice a week, just a little bit, 10 minutes, 15 minutes off your plate, that's a huge help. And if it can engage the kids and keep them sort of firing off and interested in doing something without the pressure of writing, right? There's writing prompts, but the way that I frame it is that there's no pressure to it, right? It's called the write because I'm using 3 different versions of the word write, W-R-I-T-E, which is to write, but I really mean just to express yourself. It ain't always got to be this, right? It could be drawing, right? Then the second right is R-I-G-H-T, which means correctly, but I don't believe in anything correctly. I don't think that's a thing, right? I just don't believe that there's a such thing as right and wrong. I think we all live in the gray, and there's a lot more sort of, look, all of that's more malleable than we tell kids, right? And so when I say right, when I say R-I-G-H-T, I mean however you want, right? Express yourself how you choose. And then the last right is R-I-T-E, which of course is the word ritual. Right? So this is the express yourself how you want ritual. And my job is to offer these prompts as just to help you, to kind of get you in the game, right? To guide you, to spark your imagination. That's it. That's it. It's all I'm doing. I do it twice a week, and it's fun stuff, right? Like make up a tattoo for yourself. Things that no parent ever wants to hear, right? But the truth is, I'm a guy that's covered in tattoos since I was 15 years old, right? So for me, it's like, that's what I know. So I'm like, yo, make a tattoo for yourself and write the story about why you would want this thing tattooed on your body for the rest of your life. Or Thursday, we did rewrite the first line of one of your favorite books, or create your own first line of a book that you want to write someday, right? Just the first line. That way we don't have to do the whole, write a whole story. Write one sentence. What's the first line of the book, right? Or write out, one of the best ones I think was one about what kind of letter would your hero write to you? Right. And it was all over the internet because this kid's parents sent me one about him writing to Samuel L. Jackson about his stutter. And Samuel Jackson reached out to the boy and was like, yo, that's exactly what I would say.
What a beautiful,
what an amazing thing, man. And so there's that. So there's all that. And then there's the brain yoga game, which started out as something called the imagination stretch game. And it's just something that I use this for myself. I teach grad school as well. And when I'm teaching in my master's program, I use it for icebreakers in my class. You know what I mean? I think that a writer is only good as his or her imagination, right? Or their imagination, right? And so people always ask me, how do you stay inspired? It's like, look, I live a curious life, right? Your imagination is only fueled by your curiosity. And so I have this deck of cards with different emblems on it, different symbols and different images, and you just pick two. I have the kids come on, we pick two, and they have 20 seconds to make a new invention, and you see these kids coming up with the most incredible things. I mean, like, stuff that I never would have thought about, right? Like all kinds of, like yesterday I did, one was, oh God, what was it? It was a telescope and a baby stroller. And one of the kids was like, yo, you could take the legs off the telescope, attach it to the stroller so that we can finally have a baby stroller that is useful for taller people. And when I thought, as somebody who is 6'3", everything is too small for me to be pushing around, right? And to think about the fact that I could have a baby stroller one day that was actually tall enough where I wouldn't have to break my back to push my baby around is genius. And it came from the mouth of a 9-year-old.
I think that doesn't exist right now.
It doesn't even exist, right? So like all of that kind of stuff is just dope. And then I have a newsletter that I write that gets put out once a month to the Library of Congress that directly speaks to young people about what's happening right now and how I'm feeling. And it's funny and it's, hopefully just interesting, just what's happening in my brain that I'm sharing with these kids once a month. And look, I'm just trying to stay active and love on the babies the best I can.
I love that you use the word curiosity, because that's, of course, what children are full of. And so I'm sure as much as you give to them, they're giving back to you tenfold.
Oh, God.
Building this circle of storytelling and love that's just going to, and is.
I need it, brother. By Friday every week, I'm so exhausted with the whole thing, right? With life by Friday. And so when I get online, and I'm always like, I got to get online and do the brain stretch thing, right? And then by the time I get online and you start seeing them pop up in my Instagram live, and they're so excited and they're ready to play, it reminds you that we're all right. They give me an energy and a juice to remind me that, one, I have purpose in the world because they exist. All the teachers out there, be good to your young people, because the truth is you ain't got no purpose if they ain't there.
That's right.
Like, and so I'm reminded, like, yo, thank you for your lives. Thank you for your energy. Thank you for your optimism in the midst of all this madness, and that you can come on here and we can play this silly game that's feeding us all.
Well, so to that end, I'm sure that we have guests who are curious to ask you a few questions, if that's all right.
Yeah, let's do it.
If you have a question for Jason, please raise your hand or send me a note by way of the chat, and we'll get back and we'll get to you straight away. Let's start with Maddie.
Hi, Jason Reynolds.
Hey.
I was in the play yesterday.
Yeah, I remember you. I saw you yesterday. What was your answer?
You could take the wheels from the baby store and put it on the microscope.
On the telescope. That's right. So we can roll it around. That's what's up. I remember. Good to see you.
Yeah. I really love you.
I love you too.
Thank you.
See you later.
Bye.
Thank you, Maddie. Does anyone else have a question for Jason? Please raise your hand if so. A lot of yes, so this is ways to find someone. Yes, Danielle Corral. And then we'll get to you in just a moment, Rhonda. Danielle Corral is asking the question for Jason. Have you considered writing children's picture books? I'm a K4 librarian.
Picture books? Yeah, so here's the thing. So I've written a picture book. It's coming out sometime probably next year. I've been trying to write picture books for a decade. I'm just not very good at it yet. You know, I'm working on it. You know, I think the biggest mistake that writers make is that they think that because they can write one thing, they can write all the things, you know, and it's like the picture book thing is a different muscle that I've yet to develop. I'm working on it though. I've been working with Jackie Woodson and a lot of my buddies to just help me understand how that works. But I'm not there just yet, but I'm working on it. So soon.
Great, great, thank you. Let's go now to Rhonda.
Hi.
You're not Rhonda. Say that.
My name is Raif. My mom's name's Rhonda. Just saying.
Sorry about
It's all good.
In As Brave as You. In As Brave as You, did you have the same experience that Jeannie and Ernie had, or did you just make that up?
Oh, that's a good question. Did I have the experiences that Jeannie and Ernie had in As Brave as You? So here's the secret. My name is Jason Eugene Reynolds. My brother's name is Alan Ernest Reynolds. So Jeannie and Ernie comes from me and my older brother. My grandfather was a man named Brookie Reynolds. He was a blind man. He lived in a white house on top of the hill, and behind his house was his parents' house, which was a yellow house, which was abandoned, and it had a tree growing right up through the roof of it. And I used to go and spend time with my blind grandfather, who acted just like he was a war veteran, an old army man, a rifleman, as they say in the book. And that is the way that we spent a lot of our summers and a lot of at the time when I was a kid. So 80% of that story is true.
And here's a fun fact about me, because I have a lot of blind family members, so I can really relate to that, like taking them outside and guiding them and stuff.
Yeah, it's so interesting, right? It's like because other than the fact that they can't see, everything else is like everybody else, you know. So I always, you know, here's another really quick secret about that book. When I first wrote it, there's a part in it where you remember when Grandpa is counting the money and all the dollar bills are folded a certain way so he knows how much is what. So in real life, and the way it was originally written was, he could, my grandfather, he's gone now, but back in the day, the dollar bill was a little different. The paper they used was different 20 years ago. And so my grandfather would be able to touch the corners of the dollar, and he could tell just by the paper if it was a $5 bill or a $10 bill, because he could feel the numbers just slightly lifted off the paper. They changed the paper now so that you can't do that anymore. And so when I wrote it like that originally, my editor said, that's not true, but it actually is true. It's the way my grandfather used to count money. We thought he was like an X-Man or something. It was amazing to see him know the dollar bills without ever even seeing them. So incredible stuff. So you show love to your blind family members, and I'm going to continue to show love to mine. All right?
Thank you so very much. We have in the chat a question from Diego Serra, which is, hi, Jason, my daughter Gabriella and her friend Eloise want to ask you a question about being an author. So what is it like to be an author?
What is it like to be an author? Well,
Ask your question.
The honest answer is it's cool to be an author, but it's hard. And I don't want to, it's always interesting because I want to make sure that I tell folks the truth, right? Like, being an author is the best job in the world, but it's hard to write a book one time. So to write a book over and over and over and over again It's tough. It's a tough thing to do, but it's great. It's fun. I get to do this every day. I get to wake up in the morning, come upstairs in my house, make a cup of coffee, sit at the computer, and basically imagine a world every single day of my life. Some days are good, some days are not so good, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. You know what I was doing before this? I was selling clothes. I worked in a clothing store for a decade. And so, I worked in downtown New York City in a boutique selling fancy clothes to fancy people. That's what I did before this. I wasn't no scholar. I wasn't, doing no fancy job. It wasn't like that. I was selling clothes. And so when I think about it that way, being an author is the greatest job of our time. For sure.
Your first book.
What'd you say?
How long for you to write your first?
How long did it take? It took, let's see, probably took like 3 months, but then I had to edit it 30 times probably. And so ultimately it took 3 years, but it took 3 months to write the first draft.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I'll see y'all later.
Thank you so very much.
You should have told him, Gabby, he would have read your book and he... No.
I can't hear you, bro.
Sorry about that. Now let's go to another question from the chat, which is from Mrs. H. Are you planning on writing any sequels to any of your novels?
No, I'm not planning on it. I mean, here's the thing, right? So here's the thing. People ask this, but the truth is sequels are never good. It's such a weird thing. Everybody wants a sequel, but no one ever likes sequels. No one likes sequels. It's like, you got to write a sequel. Why? So y'all can trash me on the internet? No. I ain't about to get no sequels. There will be no sequels to any of my books that I can see anytime soon. No.
All right. Thanks.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
So next question then is also from the chat, and there are several. Let's see. From Ashley Roberts, do you have any advice for someone who has never written a children, young person's book, but is scared, anxious of failure?
If you're scared of failing at writing a children's book, then that means you should probably try to write it. I really think that, run toward the things that scare you. I really believe that. I don't even write, like when I'm starting to write stories, if the story doesn't feel impossible to me, I won't even bother to try. Like everything that I've ever written has always felt so far outside of the realm of possibility. Stamped felt like something I was not equipped to do. And that's the reason I said yes, right? When we wrote All American Boys, no one wanted to publish, at the time, no one wanted to even touch a book like All American Boys. But Brendan and I wrote it anyway. When I did Long Way Down, I was like, no one's gonna buy a story that takes place in a single minute. Right? And that's why I ran toward it. When we did the track series, at the time, there were no middle grade series about Black boys that weren't fantasy or anything else. And so it seemed like something so far beyond the market that I was scared it wouldn't work. And so I ran toward it. When I did Spider-Man, everybody said there's no way you could write Spider-Man as a literary fiction novel, specifically a Black Spider-Man as a literary fiction novel. So I ran toward it, right? And so I think if it scares you, it's probably the right thing to give a shot. Go for it.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful.
Absolutely.
Thank you so very much. We now have a next question. This is a great segue because the next question is from AJ Harper. Noted, you wrote Miles Morales. Do you see yourself approaching a superhero of your own creation?
Yo, so that's a good question. So yes, I think so. I just don't know. Yes, the answer is yes, but I don't know what and how. And so, the thing about Stan Lee and his whole dynasty he built is that he did everything. Like he did it's like, I don't know what superpowers are left. I don't know. Stan Lee wrote like 500 superheroes, right? It's like, I don't really know what there could be, but there's always something that I'm missing. And so I'm sure at some point I'll try to create a superhero. Here's what I will say though. If I do invent a superhero, he or she is going to be the most regular person in the world. Like I'm not interested in like, Batman was a rich kid and the X-Men were all mutants, and like I'm trying to write something about Tyrone down the block who happens to be, who happens to have some kind of magical powers. You know what I mean? Like if I can figure that out, that's why I like Miles Morales, because he's just a regular kid from Brooklyn. If I can figure that out, but can make his power something that feels interesting and fresh, then maybe. If I can't though, then I won't do it. So we'll see.
Thank you so very much. I have a quick question for you, Jason. I mean, we've all been regular kids. We've all been on the block. So what's your superpower?
What's my superpower? I think my superpower is probably taking big things and making them small. I think that's sort of what my special ability is, taking big things, big ideas, and making them bite-sized, and even taking sour ideas and making them sweet. And like I think that's sort of what, like, I can sort of shape the world in that way. That's my thing.
Wow. That's
maybe that's what I'll do. Maybe that's what this guy's. Maybe that's what, you know what I mean. Maybe that's what it is.
Good thing we're recording this.
Exactly.
Question comes from Aritra Das, who asked, "Hi, Jason," and then of course another question came in. "Hi, Jason. What's your advice to beginners when they start writing stories?"
Forget the rules. Forget the rules. The hardest part about being a writer is basically unlearning all the things you learned in school. The only reason that they teach you all those rules is so that you know how to break them. That's the point of it. I wish teachers were honest about that, right? Like teachers should start telling students, look, I'm teaching you these rules, not because I actually want you to be a rule follower, right? Rule followers don't change the world, right? I'm teaching you these rules so that you know how to manipulate the rules and bend them into a new thing. And I think that's the first thing you have to understand. Trust your gut. Because a teacher, I'm a teacher, right? I'm a professor. I teach adults, right? And I tell my students every semester, I can teach you all the techniques, but I can't teach you how to be you. And that's the part that's going to really help you make something fresh. I can't teach you. Only you know that. And so what I would say is throw the rules away, trust your gut, and just and let it fly. It don't have to be in order. It don't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be perfectly punctuated. All of that can be fixed. You know what I mean? Just put the story on the page as free and wild as you see fit, and then go back and rearrange it to make it work. That's all.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much. Next question is from Monique Boone, who asks, during your Read Aloud Week, you made a critical statement about teachers leaving the art out of language arts. How can we prepare our teachers to master language arts and writing instruction for kids?
I think we have to start presenting them with different examples of narrative, right? And so like language arts, yes, like we call it language arts, but really we just mean language. We don't mean language arts because we never teach the art part, right? We mean teaching technical skill. We're teaching technical writing. That's what school is all about. But I think when we start offering them examples of narrative or examples of punctuation, we should also show them creative versions of the same thing. So if you want to show somebody what a run-on sentence is and why a run-on sentence it doesn't work, you also have to show them how a run-on sentence could, right? Like a run-on sentence might not work in a work email, but a run-on sentence could be powerful in a novel. And we just don't teach it like that. We teach, you got to put your commas in there, right? Or it's a stream of consciousness. Yeah, but sometimes stream of consciousness is good. It's good. Like we teach metaphor and simile, but we teach it in such a limited way that they don't get to see how it could really, really function. So I'm saying that we should teach, if we're going to teach technical stuff, there has to be a moment where we bump it up against, we do comparative literature or comparative teaching, where we bump it up against the things that are also creative. And we teach time and place instead of just teaching that this is writing. We teach, no, this is writing, and this is writing for a different time and place. And both of those things can exist at the same time.
Thank you so much, Monique. Next question is from Torrance Brown Smith. Torrance asks, how do you feel your lack of experience in a college setting as a student has helped you stretch your creativity?
Oh, man. I think what it really was for me was, so here's the thing. I took all those college classes. I was just asleep. You know what I mean? I was there. I took the classes. I was definitely there, but I just wasn't. I wasn't there, but I was there. And I think, look, I think what it was for me, my biggest, the thing that saved my life more than anything was my own irreverence. For some reason, I was the kind of kid who knew that I wanted to do something else. I failed English 101 twice, back to back. And I was a freshman in college. And when you fail English 101, they put you on academic probation because basically what they're saying is it's a weed out class, right? They're saying like, you might not be cut out for college. I also failed math at the same time. So usually kids are like, you're good at one or the other, right? I wasn't good at none of them. Math, I was a failure. English, I was like, it was like, what am I doing here? And the reason why I kept failing English was because I didn't understand why a teacher would ever want a boring essay. So my teachers would say, we're going to write an essay, thesis paragraph, 3 paragraphs in the body, closing paragraph. And I would always start my essays with, imagine a world where rain was fire. And yet, right? Like, and my teachers are like, this is not, we're in school. This is, and I'm like, I can't. And I refuse to change. And somebody gave me a journal that year for a Christmas present. And in the journal was a quote. I can't remember who said it. It was a famous quote that said, usually the greatest writers fail English 101. And that was enough for me to be like, oh, okay, well, I'm on the right path. I'm just gonna keep doing my thing, Almost failed out of school, but that was the thing. And so I think ultimately what stretched my imagination was the fact that I knew there was more than what they were teaching me. My senior thesis was about how we had to expand the literary canon, arguing, this is back then, arguing about the expansion of the literary canon and that it should not be just old white men, and that we should probably start adding in South American writers, indigenous writers, Black American writers, African writers, right? Like all these people who have changed the scope of literature. And arguing with my teacher about why Toni Morrison belonged in the canon, why Zora Neale Hurston belonged in the canon, why Langston Hughes belonged, and fighting my teachers about these things. And they fought me back, but they passed me because I was relentless. And so I always kind of knew that something seemed a little off and a little wrong and a little short-sighted. And then when I had a chance, I went on and made the world that I wish I had when I was in school.
Thank you. I always noticed you're a unique type of person in the way you talk about creativity and the way you talk about you talk about finding structure, but structure allows you to not be structured. So I know it's like a theme that you always talk about. So I really appreciate that.
Bro, you know what it is, bro? I also came up through poetry. And the first thing you learn as a poet is that, right? It's like we create structure for ourselves so that we can expand on our creativity. If you give yourself boundaries and limits, people are afraid of limits, right? They're afraid of boundaries. The truth is, though, that if you give yourself boundaries, you can play infinitely within the bounds of those boundaries, right? And so that's why Long Way Down works, because I gave myself a single minute, right? And within that minute, I could pack in as much as I wanted and be as creative as I wanted because I gave myself borders. And so usually what we're afraid of is structure, but it's within the structure that life can be structureless, right? And so play around with those things, man. Always remember 1 + 1 is 2 to most people, but 1 and 1 is always 11. If you think about it that way, right? It's a simple shift in language and perspective, right? If you ask somebody what 1 and 1 is, they'll usually say 2, but the one who says 11 is the one you want to check for.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Torrance. Ellen has had her hand up for a bit, so let's say hello to Ellen.
Hello, hi. Ellen
Hello.
Ellen from Youngsville. My question is, where do you see yourself as a writer, a person, and just part of the human race, Jason, in 10 years?
In 10 years, let's see. 10 years, I'll be 46 years old. And so I think hopefully by then I'm working a little less. I think, I work really hard right now, and I'd love to work a little bit less in 10 years from now. And hopefully I would have been, 10 years. That means that hopefully I would have had a major impact on a generation of young people who may not have been readers without this work that me and my colleagues have made. And to be a part of that story is enough for me. I don't need these books to last forever. I don't need my books to be read forever. I'm okay with people like, you got to be a classic. No, I don't. They don't have to be timeless. I'm okay with them being timely if it means that I was able to raise a generation of readers. That's enough for me. And so at that point, hopefully that would have happened. I'm chilling out somewhere, relaxing, writing a book every couple of years, and I'll pop in and out of places and look back on all the other writers that I was able to bring into the industry. On my back and who had a shot that I didn't have. I've been in this industry for 16 years and everyone has known 16 years and everyone has known my name for 6. I got signed when I was 21 to HarperCollins. And so this has been a constant fight because when I got in this industry, nobody wanted to publish books about Black boys unless you were Walter Dean Myers. That was it, right? Nobody wanted to publish any more of those books because they said there was no market. And so now we're getting to see the market shift. And looking back on that in the next 10 years, I think that'll be enough for me to say, I've done my job. If there's more to come, there's more to come. But if there's not, I'm okay.
Well, thank you for being you, and thank you for doing you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much, Alan. We have a question from the chat from Chris McGilvery, who writes, I'm a teacher in Texas, and most recently, the Texas State Board of Education has recently approved African American studies. What advice do you have for both teachers and students as they work together to learn and speak more to this truth?
Don't teach it if you're going to teach it fearfully, right? Don't teach, don't do it listen, first of all, I want to say congratulations. There's a petty part of me that wants to be like, what was y'all waiting for? Like, what in the world? What in the world were y'all waiting for? But that being said, I'll take the victory, right? Small victory. That's all good. But that being said, I think if you're going to teach African American history and African American studies and Black studies and so forth and so on, you have to know that if you don't teach it with vigor, then it could easily be taught. It could easily be made into something harmful. Teach it with vigor, right? Be excited about the fact that we're learning about this. And also, if I'm in Texas, I want to be clear. If you're going to teach it, I know it's a separate class, right? But when y'all get into that class, you make it very clear this is American history. This history is not a separate history. This is not a separate. We always talk about it like, oh, we're going to teach African American history. No, what we're going to really do is we're going to flesh out American history, right? We're going to make more whole American history, because there is no American history. There is no America without Black people, right? It does not. The whole experiment is bust. Right? The America as we know it, by the way, without all of us, there are still the indigenous people who were already here, right? But the American experiment does not exist without Black people and what we've done in our accomplishments, and also our servitude, our forced servitude. All of it has to be a part of the story. So I would say teach it with vigor and excitement. Figure out ways to teach it that are fun and interesting, because there's a lot to that, the beginning parts of that history that are heavy, and they should be heavy, right? Don't be afraid of the heaviness, but also figure out ways to not allow young people to check out of those conversations, which means you're gonna have to work a little harder, especially your white students, or especially Black students at all white schools, or right? You gotta make sure that you keep them engaged, because the moment they feel uncomfortable, they'll start backing out of it. And so we gotta make sure we set up enough reinforcement and interesting creative ideas to make sure we keep them engaged. And make sure that when you're teaching it, you're also learning it yourself. The best thing we can do right now, especially when it comes to understanding that part of our history, is telling our young people is being humble in front of our young people and telling them that we're also learning these things at the same time. We can all learn at the same time. Nobody's an expert on Black history, not even Black people. We're also learning this history. And so I think that's another thing to keep in mind. Use it as more of a social gathering in the classroom, instead of like, I'm a teacher, you're a student, I'm gonna tell you what I know. Because there's going to be one student in your class who know more than you and going to challenge you, because they got parents that know more than you, right? So make sure that you're honest about what you know and what you don't know as well. But good for y'all, man. Shout out to Texas. Hopefully y'all change the rest of them textbooks that be talking about all that craziness, like Black people wasn't slaves. We was, what y'all call us, migrant workers. We wasn't no migrant workers. Like, you know, come on, Texas. I love you, Texas, but come on.
Chris, thank you so very much.
Thank you for the encouragement. And I really like the idea of the social gatherings and being able to, have those real conversations with students and teachers so that we can learn from one another. There's just so much to learn and grow when we're able to listen and hear those stories and write about them. So thank you so much.
Hey man, try to get stamped in your school. It'll be a huge help. I know that there's already been some pushback in schools, though. People are afraid of it, which is fine. But try to get stamped in your school and see if you can use it, man. I think it'll be a big help.
Okay, will do.
Cool.
I'm thinking about that. So yes, thanks.
Yep. Thank you, Jason. You good for a few more questions?
Yeah. Let's just do it, man. It's all good.
All right, great. We have a lot of great ones. Let's see. Let's go to. Oh boy, there are a lot of little soundbite questions. if that's the right way to phrase it. Maddie, who said hello earlier, she asked if you had a favorite sport and if you had dogs.
Yeah, I don't have dogs, Maddie. I grew up with dogs. I love dogs. I could use a dog right now. But I don't have dogs because when we're not in quarantine, I'm actually traveling the world. And so I'm never home. And I would be a bad dog owner. And what did I play sports? When I was a kid, I was a wrestler. I ran track. I played basketball. And now all I do is I swim a lot. I love to swim and I love to ride my bike. But I'm usually doing. See, Maddie, when you get older, you do sports that's going like keep you healthy, right? I do all the heart sports, but everyone keep my heart working right. I got to make sure that I'm getting older, Maddie. I got to stay, got to fit in my clothes. I got to, so I'm always swimming and riding my bike, stuff like that.
Yeah. From yesterday, he rides his bike every day and runs. He's doing a triathlon right now.
See? So here's the thing, Maddie. I'm never doing a triathlon, but shout out to him. You know what I mean? Shout out to him. That's great.
And I'm fostering a dog.
And you're fostering a dog? What kind of dog?
A pebble mix.
Yeah, I grew up with pit bulls.
Yeah.
Greatest dogs ever. So sweet. So sweet. Good for you. One of these days, when we get out of quarantine, I'm going to come to wherever you are. You come hang out with your dog.
Okay. Have you read, do you know Dogman?
Do I know who?
Dogman.
Oh, yeah. Dave Pilkey. Yeah, of course. It's great. You like it?
Yeah.
Every
Have you
day,
read Dogman Fetch 22?
every single day I tell myself, why couldn't I have written Dogman? It's literally, in my mind, I'm like, why couldn't I? Dogman and Diary of a Wimpy Kid. I'm like, why couldn't I have written those books, But I haven't read the newest version of Dogman. I haven't read Dogman in a while, but I'll catch up on them.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, Maddie. So Lexi had a question for you, which is, what inspired you to make Write?
So, I mean, really just if all I was really thinking about is what would I have wanted if I had to be in school every day, what would I have wanted my teacher to tell me or give me as an assignment, I'm always just thinking about who I was when I was 13. And I'm like, gosh, what would I have wanted my teacher to say? I definitely wouldn't have wanted her to say, we're going to read some book. Honestly, I would have wanted her to be like, man, we're going to do a writing assignment, but don't worry, it's not going to be like all the other writing assignments. I'm just going to throw out a couple things. We're going to watch Jason Reynolds on some screen, and he's going to say something silly, and then we're going to use that, and we're going to write for 5-10 minutes. I could have managed that. You know what I mean? I would have been a better student had I had some of that. And then she could have eased me into the rest of the assignments for the day if we had that as sort of an icebreaker every day. So that's all I was thinking about.
I also have one more question. So I was watching your Instagram live like a couple weeks ago when you were reading Look Both Ways. And I remember you said about how your mom had cancer, and I feel very sorry for you. But I just wanted to say, how was it like when your mom had cancer? Because my family has gone through a similar situation with my cousin. She had AML, leukemia, in 2015. And she passed away. So I was wondering, how was it for you, and if anything could have changed during that time? Like if you had something like a bigger inspiration or something, what would have helped you?
So first of all, thank you for that, and I appreciate you sharing your own story about your cousin. I'm sorry to hear about your family. When my mom had cancer, I was 16, right? I was 16 years old, and both of my parents had cancer at the same time. And I was starting my freshman year of college, which is a whole other story about why I was in college so young. But I'm in my freshman year of college. I'm 16 years old. I've got a full-time job. My mom's in the hospital. I'm going, my dad's in the hospital. My life is a bit of a mess at the time. And I think the one thing that kept me going, I don't think I would have done anything differently. Well, there's one thing, but really quickly, I'll tell you. So first of all, the reason why I was able to keep pressing forward is because I was watching my mother fight. Who am I to quit? right? Who am I to quit when I'm watching this person who birthed me, who raised me, who made me who I am? I'm watching her fight every day, fighting this thing. And my mother, fortunately, did beat cancer twice. She did beat, and my father also beat cancer twice. He just last week, he got results that he's finally cancer-free for the second time, right? And so, like, I'm watching these people fight for their lives. And so it felt like the least that I could do is fight for mine. Right, it's fight for mine. I think about this every time I start moaning and groaning about, oh, the writing is so hard. Oh, life is so hard. Or when I was in school, oh, homework is so hard, right? I have so much homework. How am I going to study for this test? All I have to remind myself is your mother had to fight for her life, and you're fighting to read 20 pages of a textbook, right? It changes the way that we think about our lives. So there's that. Now, that being said, there was one thing I did wrong that I wish that I've since forgiven myself for. My mother fought cancer for 4 years, right? This process went on for a very long time, the first time. And the biggest surgery she had to sort of get her all situated happened to be on the same exact day I was supposed to sign my first publishing contract in New York City for HarperCollins, right? Now, I'm a young, hungry artist who all I want to do is make it. I want to make it. I want to make it. I want to make it. And my mother says, Jason, I'm going into this surgery. Are you going to be there? So I'm going to be there. But I got this big opportunity on the table. And my mother says, look, go sign the contract. Don't worry about it. And so I kissed my mother on the cheek as they wheel her into the operating room. And I get on the bus, I go to New York, and I sign my first contract. And my mother made it out of that surgery, but just barely. And she doesn't like to talk about it with me because she's like, I don't want you to feel bad about how she almost didn't make it and all the stuff that happened, the complications of that surgery. And I always think about how I left my mother, how I would have never been able to forgive myself, right? And how I left my mother because I was so hungry for a dream that I lost track of my priorities. And so I say all that to say, and all I had to do, by the way, is call the publishing company and say, I'll sign it tomorrow. And they would say, yeah, no problem. I'll sign it 2 days from now. They said, oh, yeah, no problem. But I was so afraid something would be taken from me. And so I left my mom. And I say that to say, no matter what you're chasing, no matter what you want to be in life, no matter how famous you want to be or how successful you want to be, just remember that none of it is as important as your family. None of it is as important as your family. Don't ever put it before your family, no matter what it is. It's never that important. And if it really is that important, it'll be there for you later on. All right? All right, be good.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Lexi. Next question is from Audrey Torres, who asks, what's your favorite book and why?
My favorite book is a book called Salvage the Bones by a woman named Jesmyn Ward. I think it's the best book written definitely in the 21st century. I think she's the best writer of the 21st century, the best writer of our time, I personally believe. I'm sure you got it in there somewhere. I know she's in the author's book. Yeah, there she is. She is, to me, she is as good as it gets. And I just love it. I love it because I think the writing is perfect in terms of sort of the clear, short language and also these poetic moments that are just invigorating. I think the story is beautiful about the days leading up to Hurricane Katrina. I think the main character is a perfect main character. I think she's 15 years old, 15-year-old girl named Ash and her pit bull dog, and they're in the South, and you rarely get to read about Black Southerners in contemporary books. All of these things that book and that writer are, to me, what I hope to be someday when I get better at writing.
You've already set the bar very high, my good man. A few people are asking what you're reading now while you're in quarantine, and are you writing at this time too?
I am writing. I'm always writing. I am writing. I'm writing a fable. Like, I just be wondering why we don't have no more why we can't write fables. So I'm writing a fable, and it's wild and strange and very different than other things that I've written, and a little bit weird. And it's all about a boy born without a mouth, and it's so super strange. And what does it mean to be voiceless? So I'm working on that, and that's weird. And so we'll see what happens. And then currently I'm reading this book. Actually, I happen to be sitting here because there's always books everywhere. I'm reading this book, These Ghosts Are Family by Macy Card, and it is brilliant. Brilliant. It's all about like a father trying to make amends with his children after faking his death. And it is genius. And it's a debut novelist, and it's powerful. Shout out to Riverhead. Riverhead, they're really publishing some of the best books right now. So everybody check it out. These Ghosts Are Family is a brilliant book. I'm trying to think, am I reading anything in the YA or middle grade space? At the moment, I don't think I am. Oh, I'm revisiting Bridge to Terabithia. So I'm revisiting that book because of what I'm working on, and I'm trying to figure out, can I steal anything, right? So I'm revisiting Bridge to Terabithia right now as well.
Or be inspired by it. So.
Yeah, yeah. Tomato, you know.
Thank you. Next question is from Dina Garrett, who asked, what or whom do you attribute all of your wisdom from?
Oh, my mother. My mother is like, you know what? My mother is like, I feel so fortunate to have been born through this particular person. I couldn't have asked for a better parent because she was so liberal in like the most incredible, when it came to thought, she was wide open. It was kind of like, look, like for instance, right? We could talk back in the house, right? And in Black families, that's like a no-no. We won't play that, you know what I mean? But in my household, my mother was like, look, you can talk back, just be respectful, but you get to say whatever you want to say to me. If you mad or if you disagree, you can tell me. Like, let me know that you feel a way. Just don't disrespect me, but you can always express yourself. So I never had a problem when I got out in the world being like, nah, I'm not afraid of you. I'm not afraid to say that I think somebody is wrong or something is wrong. She, even when it came to like the tricky stuff, right? Like religion, my mother was, she raised us in the church until I was 12. And then she was like, you can go and figure out, what you want to do and what you want to believe and how you want to believe it. And my job is to make sure that I provide the space and the information to help you delve into these things, to figure out what your path is going to be, and to love you through all of it, regardless of what that is. Now, that's a very complicated thing to do for a 12-year-old, but we had the space to go and explore. And so I got to read the Quran, and I got to read the Torah, and I got to read the Bhagavad Gita, and I got to sort of really delve into things that most parents are a little bit like, and my mom was there to answer questions for us. And lastly, I'll say this. We were raised in like just speaking about religion, and I know religion is like, don't talk about religion. Look, I'm not, everybody's entitled to love and do what they want. It's all good. I'm good for anything that's got you doing good. I'm with it, right? But my mother raised us in a house. I never heard the word sin. I didn't know what it was, right? It wasn't a part of it just wasn't a part of like the language in my household. And so because I never heard of it or never heard my mother talk about sin, we never made decisions out of fear. We only made decisions out of love. We were raised in a house where it was like, if you're going to do it because of love and compassion, not because you're afraid of punishment, right? And that changed my entire dynamic and my perspective on life forever and ever. I learned that when I was like 9. Guilt was not a thing in my house. Shame was not a thing in my house. We never had to address any of that because my mother gave us the freedom to sort of go out and just make decisions out of love. Right? And if you mess up, then fix it. But you ain't got to feel guilt, right? Or shame. And if you feel guilt, it's okay, but let it pass over you. But never shame, because guilt is about what you've done and shame is about who you are. And now you have no reason to ever feel shame, right? Like, what a liberated house to grow. I mean, it was wild to grow up in a house like that. And I didn't know it until I was grown. And I realized everybody didn't grow up like that. And that's why the books are the way they are. That's why my own life is the way it is. That's why I speak to kids with a certain kind of honesty and authenticity, because I want to make sure that I speak to them as human beings, because I love them. Love first. All the fear, everybody's scared. Don't talk to the kids that way. Don't say that around the kids. They're not going to be able to handle it. That's all fear talk. I ain't got that. We're going to lead with love. And if they have questions, I'll answer those questions, right? But we're going to always lead with love.
Thank you for that, Jason. Thank you.
Yep. Sorry about that doorbell, man. The mailman's here.
That's all right. Question from Libe, who writes, my school's motto is words matter, and we talk about words and word power. Jason, do you have a favorite word?
Ooh. That's a tricky one. I don't know. Probably, it's probably a curse word though. No. I don't know if I have a favorite Word. That's a good question. I got to figure that out. I don't think so. I love language equally. I don't think so.
There's been a request to repeat the name of the book that was your favorite.
Salvage the Bones.
Salvage the Bones by Jesmyn Ward.
What I will say about the favorite word thing is what I'm more interested in isn't the words themselves, but the origin of the words, right? So I'm a big etymology person. I like to go track the words back. So like words like enthusiasm, right? Like that's a word that's interesting, right? Because when you track it back, it literally means like, you know, in theos, right? What does it mean to be filled with God? That's what enthusiasm literally means. And so so for the Black people who grew up in Black churches, when people catch the Spirit, that's enthusiasm, right? Like that's literally what enthusiasm is. And like, that's interesting. Or words like condescension. Condescension, when you track it back, was actually a good thing. It was the king coming down to talk to his people, and he would take the crown off and he would take the robe off and he would treat the people as if they were all the same. And that's what it meant to condescend, right? And now it's seen as this bad thing, but originally it was meant to make people comfortable with whatever station they're in by knocking yourself down a peg. It's fascinating. So I'm more interested in that kind of stuff.
Can I just say thank you for saying that, because I am writing an etymology book and I'm all about etymology. So that just
that's what's up.
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, etymology.
Etymology rules.
Yeah.
You like one of my favorite joints. I know you. You're one of my favorite joints. Yo, shout out to you, man. Shout out to all the etymologists of the world. You know what I mean?
I appreciate that.
No doubt.
Thank you so much, Lee Bay. We have one last question in the chat, which comes, and now it's just disappeared. From Torrance, who I believe said hello earlier. What's your process on expanding your vocabulary?
Read, man. Read. There's no other way around it. You got to read. You got to read everything. I also have books about language. Like I read books about language. You know what I mean? I think you got to kind of get into the nerdiness of it all, man. Like if you really want to expand. And the other thing I do is I make up words all the time. You know, make up words, man. You know, smash words together and create new ones. You know what I mean? The hyphen is your friend, brother. The hyphen allows you to do whatever you want to do. Because you could take this word and put a hyphen in between two words, and suddenly it'll pass, right? As something that a conjunctive word that you create. And so I do a lot of that kind of stuff too, just to figure out. Because sometimes you can't find the language to describe the ways that you feel or the characters feel, and so you got to just make up words yourself, or turn nouns into verbs and verbs into nouns, and all the other things that we can manipulate with language.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for that question, Torrance. There is one more, which is, if you couldn't write, what would you do?
I'd be a furniture designer. Seriously.
Really?
Yeah. Anybody who knows me and knows like anybody who's ever been to my house knows that. So like I believe my mom raised us this way too. We all live like aesthetic lives, right? We believe that everything should be beautiful. Everything I own, I won't buy it. I won't even buy a board game unless it's well designed and made of good wood. And like, you know, I'm very careful about what I surround my surroundings, right? Like even my own clothes. Everybody sees me all the time. I got on black t-shirt, black jeans, and a pair of sneakers. But if you knew the process of picking out what black t-shirts I buy and what pair, I'm very particular about all that kind of stuff. And furniture is a big part of my life. You know, they're doing a big thing at HGTV about my house in a couple of months, I think, where they get into like all of my furniture and my artwork and the way my home looks, because that's like I got like all kind of books in here about furniture design and about you know, Charles Eames and that whole crew and color theory, because my house is full of all this color. I wear all black, but my house has got like yellow walls and pink walls, and I just ordered a rose colored couch that'll be here in a little bit, and like I'm very peculiar in that way. So I would probably be a furniture designer for sure. Surprise, surprise! Everybody's like, "Wait, what?" Yeah, well, you know.
How does that connect to your writing?
It connects directly to the writing, right? I'm a person who, if the book doesn't feel good, if it doesn't sound good, right? When I say those words out of my mouth, it has to ring in the air. It has to sing on the page. You got to be able to see the color. I've got books about, I recently in another interview, I held up a book that I always keep with me. It's called Rare and Familiar Color. And it's basically a book of all the colors that are extinct, right? And like stuff like that. And I use those colors to describe things in the books. People read right by it, right? But I'm using those colors to describe the color of the sky and the color of the sun and the color of skin by using rare and familiar colors that no longer exist, right? Like it's all connected for me. It also, the way the words look on the page. If you read my books, you know that sometimes the words will do different things on the page. It's all about what's aesthetically effective when it comes to even the way books look as language on page.
Well, there is one more question, which is
last question, Bale. We'll be coming up on one. I'm taking my daily walk after this, bro.
From Reacher, very quickly, do you think blogging is a great hobby or a job?
Do I think blogging is a great hobby or a job?
Yes. Or something else?
I think blogging can be whatever you want it to be. If you want blogging to be a job, I think it can be a job if you can be consistent and treat it like one, right? If you're consistently doing it every day, then there's no reason why, you know, down the line, people can't go to that blog as something that everybody goes to for whatever you have to say, right? Or it can be a hobby, somewhere for you to put your thoughts and ideas, you know, or it can be a little bit of both, right? Figure out ways, maybe it's neither of those things for that matter. Maybe it's, you know, like I think about things like Tumblr. Is Tumblr a blog? You know, or Pinterest. You know, these sort of using it as pin boards, places for you to just tack on random thoughts or whatever it is. I think you can make anything whatever you want that thing to be, whether it's a blog, whether it's a book, whether it's a home, right? Everything can be malleable and molded into whatever you want it to be. You get to make the world. I wish more of us understood that. You get to make the world every day, and you get to remake the world as often as you like.
What an absolutely beautiful way in which to finish, Jason. That is the beauty of what you do. You're helping inform young people, old people, children of all ages, lives and worlds with every book you write. We thank you so much for sharing your time with all of our guests today. Thanks, Jason, and you for joining us today. You can help writers in need by buying Jason's and other great writers' books at beowulfsheehan.com/an-author-a-day or by donating directly to anauthor'sleaguefund.org/donate. You can find today's talk soon on the An Author a Day live channel on YouTube. Look out for it in the coming days. Please join us at 2 p.m. Eastern Daily Time next Sunday, May 10th, when our guest will be Leslie Jameson, and the following Friday at noon, May 15th, when our guest will be Yeonmi Park. Be safe, be healthy, be inspired, and we'll see you then. Thank you all so very much.